Hi, everyone. My name is Horsefacts, and I work on Farcaster. And I'm here to share a little bit about what we've been working on and what we've learned this year in on-chain social and consumer crypto. So Farcaster is a decentralized social network built on Ethereum. And this is what it looks like right now. It's a feed-focused, short-text social network. You can create a profile, follow people, topics you're interested in, post text, images, links, and videos. It looks maybe a lot like purple Twitter. And if you squint, it might look a little bit like Instagram or Reddit or Facebook too. That's because it's built on the same primitives: your identity, your social graph, and text and media content. Just curious how many of you are on Farcaster? Cool. Who opens the app more than twice a day? Awesome. Cool. I know some of you. If you're not, you can get started at farcaster.xyz, download Warpcast, sign up, and get started. So a huge reason I joined the Farcaster team is because I love Twitter. I've been a Twitter user for 17 years, which is the majority of my adult life. I've met many internet friends and many people there. I think my career in tech and crypto honestly wouldn't exist without Twitter. My Twitter account traces my relationships and interests over 2 decades. And although I've never been good at keeping a journal or writing a blog, I've always managed to find time to tweet. It's not unreasonable to say that tweets are the primary written record of my life. But of course, they're not really mine. If my account gets suspended or deleted, that's all gone. And it's not possible to take my posts, my audience, or my follow graph to another platform. It wasn't always this way. I'm old enough to remember when it wasn't. Before Twitter had a mobile app, I used Tweetbot, which was a third-party Twitter client. Back in 2017, I wrote an open source framework for building Twitter bots that users used to write generative poetry bots and generative art bots on Twitter. And when I was learning to code, I even rebuilt the Twitter client just to learn React. This was all possible thanks to Twitter's open, public APIs. Today, though, those APIs are mostly closed, deprecated, or paywalled. At Farcaster, we're building social networking as an open protocol. On Farcaster, your account and identity live on-chain on Optimism as something you actually meaningfully own. Your data and social graph are stored and replicated on a network we call hubs, which can't be shut down like a private API. And sort of at every level of the stack, we've designed Farcaster with programmability in mind as a first-class feature. We want to guarantee that users can own a direct relationship with their audience and that developers can always build apps on the platform. So I want to talk briefly about apps versus protocols. A big idea that guides the way we build Farcaster is something we call product-led protocol development. Product-led protocol development means that the same core team who are building the Farcaster protocol are also building a consumer-facing product on top of it at the same time. That product is Warpcast, which right now is the main Farcaster client. Most of us who work on Farcaster work on both the protocol and the product. So for example, I wrote the smart contracts that store your identity on-chain, and I also work every day shipping React Native code. We think that building both of these things together, the product and the protocol, at the same time is critical to getting the design right. There are lots of successful apps that are already built on top of open protocols. So Gmail is built on email. GitHub is built on Git. Apple Podcasts is built on RSS. And Warpcast is built on Farcaster. But critically, we're building both at the same time, right alongside each other. We got to this viewpoint basically by working back from our end goal. We want to build an internet-scale social protocol. And if you want to do that, you'll need multiple apps and clients built on top of it. If you want multiple apps and clients, you need developers to build those apps. And those developers want users. Of course, users don't use protocols. They use apps. So if your goal is to build a protocol, you should build that initial app on top of it to bootstrap the network. Maybe more importantly, though, product-led protocol development is also about discovering the shape of the product that we're building. Building crypto protocols, I think, is kind of like building a space shuttle, and especially if you're building them on top of things like immutable smart contracts. The stakes are extremely high. The mission needs to be very well understood from the start. Every component needs to be carefully designed and rigorously tested. And when you're building a protocol like this, you kind of get one shot to get it right. You can launch it, and once it's in flight, you hope that everything worked exactly the way you expected. I think in particular, this is one reason that successful crypto products are largely financial so far. It's not just because crypto is programmable money, although that's a big part. It's also because these products are well understood. We've been building things like lending markets and order books for a long time, and it's possible to implement them in a smart contract. We kind of know how they work. Maybe there are some interesting problems to solve and technical problems in how we implement them on chain, but kind of the shape of the product is well known. A social protocol, though, is completely different. We think we know a few of the core primitives. We know there's your identity, your social graph, your posts. But the exact shape of how to decentralize a social protocol is something we need to discover iteratively rather than design up front. Consumer social is fast and fickle. Probably 90% of the experiments we try in the Warpcast client will fail for one reason or another. So it's just not feasible to start by thinking really hard and writing your idea into a smart contract. Instead, we take a deliberate product-led approach. First, we iterate and build features at the Warpcast client level, where we can experiment and build rapidly. Once we've tested those and they succeed, we think about exposing them over public APIs that anyone can use, figure out what shape they should take in a world with multiple clients. And then, if those succeed, we figure out how to decentralize them and add them into the protocol. This still means we need to think up front about how to build a sufficient path to decentralization with these features. But sort of stepping back and rethinking this conventional protocol-first approach has served us really well for building and iterating at the pace of consumer social. So 2024 was a big year for Farcaster. Daily active users on the network grew about 30x between January and July, and we now have somewhere between 30 and 40,000 daily actives every day. This was a huge step function for the network. It's a lot of users for a consumer crypto app, and it's still kind of nothing for an at-scale social network. You'll notice this graph isn't entirely up and to the right. We've had some moments of really massive growth driven by attention, and we've had some times when we've been challenged to figure out how to retain and build a network that retains users. We've been focused on two major things this year. One is building programmable Legos for developers, and the other is creating cozy corners for users. And I want to share two examples of these today. One is frames, which are interactive apps embedded in the Farcaster social feed. And the second is channels, which are curated spaces for communities. So yeah, first, programmable social. Farcaster has many programmable surfaces, things that you can build on and where developers can build apps into the social feed. But the biggest one is frames. Frames are a way to embed interactive apps in the social feed. If you're building a crypto app, it can be tough to get distribution. You have to find the app, click a link, open a new page, sign in, maybe connect your wallet. Only after all this can a user do something interesting in your app. Frames enable apps to embed calls to action and crypto transactions directly in the feed where users are. We wrote the first frame spec back in January, and since then, developers have built a bunch of interesting frames for all kinds of useful applications. So Zora, Rodeo, and MoshiCam have built frames that enable users to mint directly in feed. Every polymarket URL unfurls as a frame on Farcaster, so you can make a prediction in just a few taps. Every mirror and paragraph article is a frame, where you can subscribe in one click, or you can even pop up this little mini app window to read articles right in the app. Developers have built frame apps for organizing and managing events in the real world, like this events frame, as well as online, things like meetups and audio spaces. There are frames for payments, subscription, and commerce. This is one of my very favorites, which came out of the Variant Frames hackathon. This is a Girl Scout cookies frame that embedded a full shopping cart and checkout experience where you could buy Girl Scout cookies with USDC. And this was in like the first week of frames. And this is just the surface. There are frames for polls, games, crowdfunding, tipping, swapping, and much more. Frames get even more interesting when you combine them with other programmable surfaces within Farcaster. So for example, developers can build mini apps that interactively add frames from the cast composer. So you can insert a poll with Ponder, search for a GIF to insert with a GIF keyboard, or share books, songs, and movies with Nook. You can also launch a frame by clicking on a cast to take actions like translating, bookmarking, tipping, kind of like a browser extension for a social network or a programmable like button. And you can send frames in DCs to send reminders, sort of interactive apps that you can directly send to users, like this event reminder on the left. So all of these Legos snap together to enable developers to extend Farcaster and Warpcast in new and interesting ways, and even to build headless apps on top of the Farcaster network. So frames and programmable social bring outside apps into the Farcaster feed. It's just as powerful, though, to bring your Farcaster social graph outside of Warpcast and into other apps. Sign in with Farcaster enables apps to use your Farcaster account for login, kind of like signing in with an Apple or Google identity, but backed by your on-chain Farcaster identity. Since the Farcaster graph is open and public, that means apps can find your friends and followers right away, which helps them solve the cold start problem for building new social apps. Here's some examples. Dracula is a TikTok-style short video app that launched on top of the Farcaster graph. Icebreaker on the right is a professional network that extends the Farcaster graph with on-chain attestations and endorsements. Zora and Rodeo built Instagram-like minting experiences that used the Farcaster graph to bootstrap follows. And Optimism used sign-in with Farcaster for auth to their retro grants portal this year. If you're building a consumer crypto app, accessing an open social graph like Farcaster means you no longer have to build it from scratch. Finally, there are alternative clients. So although Warpcast is still by far the most dominant client, it's still really early, there are more than 10 alternative Farcaster clients, mostly focused on the same kind of text and feed focused format. For example, there's Kiosk, which focuses on a first-class minting experience. There's Supercast, which embeds tipping and token features and crypto stuff kind of natively into the app. And Nounspace here on the left, which is a highly customizable client built for nouns. If you'd like to keep up with all the interesting things being built on Farcaster, I recommend checking out this Explore tab, this globe right in the middle of the Warpcast app. Tap that and you can browse. We have over 150 apps listed, and developers are building more every day. OK, our second major focus has been building what we call cozy corners for communities through a feature called channels. Channels, I think, are a good case study of this iterative, product-led approach. And they're also the most challenging thing we've worked on this year. We've spent a lot of time building out kind of the core table stakes features of any social app, things like your profile, your follows, feeds, things like this. But channels are really our first experiment with a new social primitive. You can think like if Facebook groups and subreddits had a baby, maybe that's kind of what a channel is. These began as public topic-based feeds, kind of like hashtags. And we started with a few curated topics within Warpcast. These are things like music, Ethereum, and memes. Ultimately, though, hashtags aren't that interesting. We decided to iterate on this and figure out kind of where to take this channel concept. So late last year, we opened them up to the public. And although they're still a Warpcast-only feature, anyone can create one. Since then, we've had users create over 13,000 channels. So early on, when the network had hundreds or thousands of daily users, channels were naturally cozy corners. And they sort of handled themselves, moderated themselves. But as the network has grown, we've really had to iterate on tools for channel owners to scale quality, moderate content, and build meaningful communities. Our first approach here, Channels v1, was pretty standard moderation tooling. We gave owners the ability to hide unwanted casts and users. But this proved to be a lot of work for channel owners. So in v2, we tried something new, and we inverted this model. Instead of hiding content, owners could curate content into the feed, basically choose posts and interesting content that they would kind of promote into the main feed. We built basic curation tools into Warpcast, but we also opened this feature up to third-party developers, so they could build basically automated moderation bots that were highly programmable. So this is an example of AutoMod, which is a tool that would let you set up lots of different rule sets and programmable features for moderating your channel. This worked OK, but ultimately we found that this was too much work for channel owners, right? These programmable tools were very powerful. This model was very elegant, but ultimately it was still too much work, right? Channel owners had to sift through lots of spam, figure out how to set these rule sets, and it was all very complex. So recently we've moved from this to a Channels v3, a membership model, where now rather than moderating content, curating content, you select who's in your channel. You manage the membership. So this is our third iteration of channels. Just a few weeks ago, we took this. It's a big bet and a big breaking change, and we will see if it works. But now instead of curating content, you manage who can join. I think one exciting thing about channels is that they are programmable like the rest of Farcaster. Your membership can be token-gated, credential-based, rules-based, proof of work, invitation only. It's up to you. We've built programmable surfaces in so you can decide this for yourself. And today, yeah, we have channels based around niche interests like poetry, sardines, walking your cat. We have channels based around on-chain communities like Nouns, Hire, and VIP. Channels for brands like Base and Zora. Channels based around locations like New York City. and channels for events like DevCon and ETH Global. So the final step in this, and something a lot of users are interested in and anticipating, is decentralizing channels, like moving their ownership on chain, making them fully interoperable across clients, making them something that you can own. And although people have been eagerly awaiting this feature, we had to navigate a full mini idea maze here to even start to understand the right shape. And I'm not sure we're there yet. If we'd started at the protocol level, rather than experimenting in the Warpcast app, trying to figure out what the shape of this feature should be, we would have been wrong the first time, and we would have been stuck with it. So ultimately, we're very excited about channels as membership communities, and especially the opportunity for communities to onboard users directly into channels. So you'll join Farcaster, and on day one, you'll be a member of a community and be able to find interesting people and topics to follow. OK, so what's next? We're thinking about a few things. First, making frames even better. So frame developers have been extremely creative under really significant constraints. You basically get an image and 4 buttons to build your entire app. But frames can still be kind of clunky. If you've ever used like a multiple-step frame, you've probably experienced this. So we're experimenting with embeddable mini apps that are fully interactive rather than just limited to this simple frame interface of an image and 4 buttons. Second is making on-chain actions easier with a first-class embedded smart wallet. So right now, jumping out of an app and into a wallet is still too high friction on mobile. It takes you out of the app context, into this wallet context. It's just too difficult and high friction. So today, account abstraction and tooling for building embedded wallets, we think, is finally mature enough that you can build a seamless and self-custodial wallet experience right into the app. Finally, and this is like really recent, is interactions with automated AI agents. So this is an area that's changing extremely fast. But the programmability of Farcaster makes it a great place for AI-based agents that take on-chain actions. This is one example from, I think, just the last week. An AI bot recently learned how to post bounties, how to send payments, how to interact with other bots on the network. On the right, it even launched a token by asking another bot to launch a token on chain for it. And the really cool thing about this, I think, is that it didn't do this by using special APIs designed for bots. It just learned how to use the same primitives that humans use. It learned to click on frames. It learned how to make posts. It learned how to reply and interact with other bots on the network. So ultimately, I think this is a great illustration of the power of programmable social. When you build open, permissionless, composable tools, it means developers can build new and interesting things that you never anticipated or designed for. And this is certainly one of them. I'm really excited to see where this goes in the next few weeks. So that's Farcaster. If you want to check it out, you can find Warpcast in the App Store. Thanks.